Somewhere right now, someone is breaking a promise they meant to keep. Not out of cruelty, just out of being human. A friend who swore they would always be there stopped answering the phone. A parent who loved without condition still had a limit, somewhere, that got reached. Even the most generous person you know has a bottom to their generosity. A day when they were simply too tired, too broke, too hurt to give anything else. This is not an accusation. It is just what it means to be a created thing. Every quality you have ever admired in another human being was borrowed, temporary, and eventually spent. And yet you have felt, in your best moments, brushes with something that felt bigger than that. A mercy that seemed to come from nowhere. A justice you could not explain rationally, but felt land perfectly. A love that outlasted every reason to walk away. What if those brushes were not accidents? What if they were fingerprints? What if there is exactly one source in existence who holds every one of those qualities completely, permanently, without ever needing to borrow, without ever running dry, and without ever once getting it wrong? There are 99 names traditionally attributed to that source, each one a description of something real, something total, something no created being could ever fully hold. By the end of this, one of those names is going to answer a question you have probably asked in your darkest moment. A question about why pain exists at all, if love is real. Keep that question in the back of your mind. We are going to earn the answer, not just hand it to you. In Islamic tradition, these are called Al-Asma ul-Husna, the most beautiful names. And the number 99 comes from words attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, describing them as the names of Allah. Whoever preserves them will enter paradise. But preserving them is not about memorizing a list the way you might memorize state capitals. It is about understanding what each one actually claims, and why the claim only makes sense if it belongs to something uncreated. Here is the lens we are going to use for all 99, so keep it close. A human being can be generous once. A human being can be just in one decision, and biased in the next. Patient on a good day, and short-tempered on a bad one. Loving when it cost them nothing, and cold the moment it cost them everything. Every human virtue is a moment, not a nature. It flickers. It depends on mood, on resources, on how much sleep you got last night. What these 99 names describe is not a moment. It is a nature. A permanent, total, uninterrupted possession of a quality, with no gap, no exception, no version of the source, where the quality is absent. That is the difference between a candle and the sun. A candle can genuinely give light. It is not lying about being a light source, but it burns down, it gets blown out. It was never the reason light exists in the first place. The sun does not try to be bright. It cannot be anything else. Keep that distinction running, under everything you are about to hear. Start with the two names most people have already heard without knowing what they are hearing, because they open nearly every chapter of the Quran and nearly every act of worship a Muslim performs. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Raheem. Both come from the same root, Rahma, mercy, but they are not redundant. They describe two different textures of the same infinite quality. Ar-Rahman is mercy in its widest possible reach, the mercy that falls on everyone and everything that exists, believer or disbeliever, human or animal, the mercy woven into the fact that your lungs know how to breathe without you supervising them, that rain falls on fields belonging to people who have never once said a prayer of thanks for it. It is mercy as the operating condition of the entire universe. Ar-Raheem is narrower and it is closer, the specific, personal, relational mercy reserved for those who turn toward their Creator, the mercy that responds, that notices, that meets a person exactly where their need is. A human can imitate a sliver of either. A doctor can show wide, general kindness to every patient who walks through the door, and that same doctor can show a closer, specific tenderness to the ones they have come to know personally. But even the best doctor alive has a limit to both. There are patients they resent. There are days the compassion runs out before the shift does. Ar-Rahman never has a day like that. There is no version of existence where the mercy is switched off, no corner of creation excluded from it, because it does not depend on anything outside itself to keep flowing. If your name, or a name in your family, carries the word Rahman inside it, Abdul Rahman, servant of the infinitely merciful, sit with that for a second, because it is not decoration. It is one of the oldest and most common names in the Muslim world for a reason. It is a daily, spoken reminder that mercy is not something you manufacture. It is something you are meant to reflect, imperfectly, the way a small mirror reflects a sun it could never contain. You do not own that mercy by carrying the name. You are pointed toward it, every time someone says it to you. Move to Al-Malik, the king, but not king in the sense of a throne someone can be pushed off of. Human kings rule at the mercy of armies, treaties, the loyalty of people who could, in theory, revolt tomorrow. Their power is borrowed from the very people they rule over. Al-Malik owns creation the way an author owns a story, not the way a landlord owns a building he could lose to the bank. There is no council Allah answers to, no coalition that could withdraw its support, no version of reality where the kingship was granted and could therefore be revoked. Beside it sits Al-Quddus, the absolutely pure, free of every flaw, every imperfection, every trace of the kind of moral mess that trails behind human power almost without exception. And as Salam, the source of peace, not merely peaceful, but the very origin peace flows from, untouched by the chaos, decay, and conflict that define everything else that exists. Put those three together, king, pure, peace, and you get a picture of authority with none of the corruption that human authority almost always accumulates, because human power corrupts precisely because the one holding it is incomplete, insecure, capable of being threatened. Nothing threatens Al-Malik. There is nothing to defend, because there is no rival. Al-Mu'min, the grantor of security and faith, is where the covenant language starts, the promise that this source can be trusted absolutely, that a promise made will be a promise kept, without the small betrayals that erode trust between people over years. And Al-Muhaymin, the guardian, watching over every single created thing simultaneously, not distracted, not needing to choose which crisis to attend to first, the way a single human guardian would have to triage 100 emergencies down to the one they can actually reach. Then Al-Aziz, the Almighty, and Al-Jabbar, the Compeller, and Al-Mutakabbir, the Supremely Great, three names that together describe a strength no opposition can meaningfully resist, not because Allah has simply won every fight so far, but because the very category of being defeated does not apply to something that has no equal to be defeated by. Human strength is always comparative. Someone is always stronger than you, even if you have not met them yet. There is no comparative for these names. There is nothing above them to be measured against. Here is where the first real turn in the argument happens, so pay attention. Al-Khaliq, the creator. Al-Bari, the originator. Al-Musawwir, the fashioner. Three names, three stages of the same act, imagining something into a plan, bringing it out of non-existence into existence, and shaping it into its final form. Human beings use the word create constantly. We say an artist creates a painting, an engineer creates a bridge, a writer creates a story. But look closely at what is actually happening in every one of those cases. The artist did not create the pigment, the canvas, the physics of how light bounces off a surface into an eye that was itself never designed by the artist. Every human act of creation is rearrangement. We take materials that already exist, that we did not invent, that operate according to laws we did not write, and we move them into new configurations. That is astonishing, and it is worth celebrating, but it is not creation from nothing. Al-Khaliq is the only name in existence that gets to claim origination without borrowed material, without pre-existing law, without a canvas someone else stretched first. Everything that has ever been rearranged by human hands was first, at some point, brought into being from nothing by this single, unshared act. If you are watching this and you carry a name like Musawwir, Khaliq, or any name pointing toward creation and design, understand what that name is quietly claiming about you, that you were not an accident assembled by blind chance, but something fashioned, on purpose, with a form chosen for you specifically. That is not a small thing to carry in a name. That is a daily reminder that your existence was intended. Al-Ghafur, the constant forgiver, and Al-Qahar, the subduer, sit strangely close together, mercy and overwhelming power in the same breath. And that pairing is deliberate, because it answers something people quietly worry about, that a God powerful enough to subdue everything must be too harsh to also forgive endlessly, or that a God who forgives endlessly must be too soft to actually be in control. Al-Ghafar is not forgiveness because Allah cannot afford to be angry. It is forgiveness offered from a position of total power, which is the only kind of forgiveness that means anything. A weak person forgiving you because they have no other option is not generosity. It is helplessness, dressed up as virtue. Real mercy only exists when the one extending it had every right and every ability to do otherwise. Al-Wahhab, the bestower, gives without transaction, without expecting return, which is worth sitting with, because almost every gift a human being ever gives carries some thread of expectation attached to it, even unconsciously. Even a birthday present carries a quiet hope for gratitude, for reciprocity, for the relationship to be strengthened by the exchange. Ar-Razzaq, the provider, sustains every living thing on earth continuously. The insect no human has ever seen, the fish in the deepest part of the ocean, the plant growing in a crack of concrete nobody planted it in. Provision on that scale is not charity. It is not a decision made once and then left running. It is an active, uninterrupted, moment-to-moment sustaining of billions of lives that never stops, never gets postponed, never runs low. If you carry the name Kareem, generous, or Wahhab, giver, or Razzaq in a family name, know that every time it is spoken, it is quietly pointing past you, toward the only source of giving that never expects anything back. Al-Fatah, the opener, opens doors that look permanently shut, and Al-Alim, the all-knowing, knows not only every fact that exists, but every fact that could have existed under different circumstances. Every choice you almost made, every thought you have never spoken aloud to another human being. Human knowledge is always partial, always filtered through what someone happened to witness or was told. Al-Alim's knowledge has no gaps to fill in, because there was never a moment it was absent from anything. Al-Qabid and Al-Basit, the constrictor and the expander, control the ebb and flow of provision and circumstance in a person's life, the tightening and the loosening. And this pair matters more than it looks like at first glance, because it means the hard seasons of your life are not proof of abandonment. They are one half of a deliberate rhythm. The same hand that gave you room to breathe is the one that occasionally narrows the path, and both movements come from the same wisdom. Al-Khafid and Al-Rafi, the Abbasir and the Exalter, Al-Muiz and Al-Mudhil, the bestower of honor and the withholder of honor, describe how status genuinely rises and falls in this world, not by luck, not purely by human effort, but under a governance that no campaign strategist or lucky break fully explains. As Sami, the all-hearing, and Al-Basir, the all-seeing, hear and see without organs, without distance, without the delay that light and sound take to travel to a human eye and ear. Every prayer whispered in the smallest room on earth reaches Al-Sami at the exact same moment as the loudest cry in the most crowded square. There is no volume threshold, there is no proximity requirement. Al-Hakam, the judge, and Al-Adl, justice itself, are worth slowing down for, because this is where the contrast between human and divine becomes almost uncomfortable to look at directly. Every human judge who has ever lived carries bias into the courtroom, sometimes small, sometimes enormous, shaped by upbringing, by tiredness, by who reminds them of someone they love or someone they resent. Even judges who try with everything they have to be fair are working against the current of their own nature. Al-Adl is not a judge trying to be fair against internal resistance. There is no internal resistance to overcome, because there is nothing in the one judging that benefits from injustice. A human can be bribed, threatened, flattered, exhausted into a bad ruling. None of those levers exist here. That is not a small technical difference. It means the justice this name describes is the only justice in existence that was never at risk of being anything else. Al-Latif, the subtle and gentle, is one of the most quietly devastating names on the list once you understand it properly, because it describes a kindness so fine-grained it reaches you in ways too small to even notice, as kindness in the moment, the exact right person texting you on the exact day you needed it, without knowing why, the small delay that kept you out of danger you never saw coming. Mercy small enough to disguise itself as coincidence. Al-Khabir, the all-aware, knows the fine detail underneath every surface, not just what happened, but why. Not just the visible fact, but the hidden motive behind it. If you have ever felt fully unseen in your pain, unnoticed in the private, ordinary suffering nobody else clocked, this pair of names is the direct answer to that ache, because being subtly known in your smallest details is exactly what these two describe. Al-Halim, the forbearing, is patience with a very specific flavor, restraint in the face of wrongdoing that could justly be punished immediately, but is instead met with delay, with room to change course. Al-Halim, the magnificent, describes a scale of greatness that has no upper boundary, nothing left to add. Al-Ghafur and Ash-Shakur, the forgiving and the appreciative, sit together almost tenderly, forgiveness for the bad someone has done, paired with genuine appreciation for the good, however small it was, however late it came. Al-Ali, the Most High, and Al-Kabir, the greatest, describe a height and magnitude with nothing above it to compare against. And this is the point in the list where it helps to pause and notice what has been happening across every name so far. Each one, taken alone, is already more than any human trait scaled up, but taken together, layered on top of each other, mercy without limit, justice without bias, knowledge without gaps, power without rival, generosity without expectation, patience without a breaking point, they do not just describe a very impressive being. They describe something categorically different from anything that exists inside creation, because inside creation, every strength comes bundled with a corresponding weakness. The generous person is often the one who gets taken advantage of. The just person is often the one who struggles to be merciful. The powerful person is often the one who struggles to be humble. Human virtues trade off against each other, because a human being only has so much capacity to go around. What these 99 names describe is a being with zero trade-offs, complete in every direction at once, which is precisely the kind of completeness nothing inside a limited created universe could ever produce on its own. Al-Hafiz, the preserver, and Al-Muqit, the sustainer, guard and nourish existence down to its smallest thread, and Al-Hasib, the reckoner, keeps an account so exact it needs no correction, no appeal, no second draft. Al-Jalil, the majestic, and Al-Karim, the generous, are two more names commonly folded into human names across the Muslim world. And if either belongs to you or someone you love, notice again what is being claimed quietly every time it is said aloud. Majesty and generosity, not as a personality trait someone happened to develop, but as an attribute borrowed for a name, in hope that the bearer might reflect a fragment of it. Ar-Raqib, the watchful, and Al-Mujib, the responsive, describe attentiveness paired with actual response, not a distant watching, but a watching that answers, that hears a call and moves toward it. Al-Wasi, the all-encompassing, and Al-Hakim, the all-wise, describe a scope with no edge and a wisdom in which nothing is ever wasted, no event without purpose, no delay without reason, even the ones that make no sense from inside the moment they are happening. Now sit with Al-Wadud, the loving. This is not affection as a passing feeling, warm one day and cold the next, depending on circumstance. This is love, as a fixed, permanent, unconditional orientation toward creation. Love that does not require the beloved to earn it first. Love that keeps extending itself toward people who have spent years ignoring it. If your name or a name close to you carries Wadad or Wadud inside it, you are carrying, quite literally, a piece of the word for the deepest, steadiest form of love that exists. A love that has never once, in the entire history of everything, run out, cooled, or turned its back first. Al-Majid the glorious, and Al-Ba'ith, the resurrector, who brings the dead back to life, and Ash-Shahid, the witness to everything that has ever happened, seen directly, not through report or reconstruction. Al-Haq, the absolute truth, is worth pausing on, because it means something more radical than simply telling the truth. It means being the standard against which everything else is measured, for truth or falsehood, the reference point itself, not a participant in the measuring. Al-Wakil, the trustee, the one to whom every outcome can genuinely be handed over, and Al-Qawi and Al-Mateen, the strong and the firm, strength that has no fatigue built into it, firmness that never has to be re-established after being tested. Al-Wali, the protecting friend, and Al-Hamid, the praiseworthy, praised not because creation decided to praise, but inherently worthy of it, whether anyone ever says a word of it aloud. Al-Muhsi, the counter of all things, keeping track down to the smallest detail without ever losing the thread. Al-Mubdi and Al-Mu'id, the originator and the restorer, the one who began everything and the one who will bring it back again, the same hand at both ends. Al-Muhyi and Al-Mumit, the giver of life and the bringer of death, hold something people rarely think about directly, that death is not evidence of absence, not a system malfunction, but as deliberately administered as life itself, under the same governance, by the same hand. Al-Hayy, the ever-living, and Al-Qayyum, the self-subsisting sustainer of all, are considered by many scholars to be the greatest of all 99 names, because they describe existence that depends on absolutely nothing outside itself, while simultaneously holding every other existing thing in place. Every human life depends on oxygen it did not create, food it did not grow from nothing, a heartbeat it does not consciously maintain. Al-Hayy needs none of that. Life here is not sustained, it simply is, permanently, without a source behind it. Al-Wajid, the finder. Al-Majid, the noble. Al-Wahid, the one, describing a oneness that is not first in a series, not one among others, but singular, in a way that excludes the very possibility of a second. As-Samad, the Eternal Refuge, the one every single created thing turns toward in need, while needing nothing itself in return, is one of the sharpest names on the entire list, because it draws a line that cannot be crossed by anything created. Everything you have ever depended on was, itself, depending on something else. Your parents depended on their parents. The food depended on soil, on rain, on a sun that depended on physical laws it did not write. As-Samad is the point where that chain of dependency has to stop, because an infinite chain of things depending on other things depending on other things, with nothing at the bottom actually holding it up, is not a chain, it is a collapse. Something, somewhere, has to be the one thing that needs nothing, and is needed by everything. That is not a leap of faith. That is what has to be true for anything else to be able to stand at all. Al-Qadir and Al-Muqtadir, the able and the powerful, describe capability with no threshold it could fail to reach, and Al-Muqaddim and Al-Mu'akhir, the expediter and the delayer, govern timing itself, moving some things forward and holding others back, which means the thing you have been waiting years for, and the thing that came too fast for you to prepare for, were both, in fact, timed. Al-Awwal and Al-Akhir, the first and the last, existing before anything else began, and remaining after everything else ends, and Az-Zahir and Al-Batin, the manifest and the hidden, visible in the evidence of creation all around you, and hidden from direct sight at the same time, both at once, without contradiction. Al-Wali the governor, Al-Muta'ali the self-exalted, exalted above every flaw not by effort but by nature. Al-Bar, the source of goodness, and At-Tawwab, the ever-returning, the one who accepts a person back no matter how many times they have wandered off. Repentance accepted not once, not twice, but every single time it is genuinely offered, without a limit on the count. Al-Muntakim, the avenger, exists alongside Al-Afu, the pardoner, and Ar-Ra'uf, the most kind. And this pairing matters, because a mercy with no accountability behind it is not mercy, it is indifference. A God who forgave everyone, regardless of what they did, would not be loving. He would be careless about the people harmed by what was never addressed. Real mercy needs a real justice sitting next to it, or it means nothing at all. Malikul Mulk, owner of all sovereignty, and Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, possessor of majesty and honor, and Al-Muqsit, the equitable, and Al-Jami, the gatherer, who will bring every soul that has ever lived back together on a single day, and Al-Ghani, the self-sufficient, needing nothing from anyone, ever, and Al-Mughni, the enricher, and Al-Manani, the preventer, and Ad-Dar and An-Nafi, the source of both harm and benefit, which unsettles some people until they realize that a being who can only give benefit and has no power over harm is not actually all-powerful, and a being with real power has to hold both. An-Nur, the light, is not light in the physical sense, not photons, but the source that makes understanding itself possible, the reason clarity exists at all, instead of permanent confusion. Al-Hadi, the guide, leads toward that clarity for anyone honestly searching for it. Al-Badi, the incomparable originator, has no prior model it copied creation from, no blueprint borrowed from somewhere else. Al-Baqi, the everlasting, remains after everything else, every civilization, every ocean, every star, eventually ends. Al-Wasith, the inheritor, will be the one still standing, when every single thing that was ever owned by anyone reverts back to where it actually came from, Ar-Rashid, the guide to the right path, directs without ever being mistaken about which path that is. And now, finally, the one this entire video has been quietly building toward, As-Sabur, the patient. Remember the question sitting in the back of your mind since the beginning, the one about why pain exists at all, if love and mercy are supposedly real. Here is where it gets answered. Not dismissed, not explained away, answered. As-Sabur does not mean Allah is simply slow to react. It means restraint in the face of things that could be stopped immediately, held back deliberately, for reasons that unfold over time, rather than instantly. Every human parent who has ever let a child struggle with something hard, knowing they could intervene and end the discomfort in a second, but chose not to, because the struggle itself was doing something the rescue would have prevented, has felt one distant echo of this name. Multiply that by infinite wisdom, infinite knowledge of every consequence branching out from every possible intervention, and you get closer to what As-Sabur actually means. The pain in your life, and the pain in the world, is not proof that mercy is absent. It is proof that something patient, something that sees the whole shape of a story you can only see one frame of at a time, is choosing when to act and when to wait, the same way Al-Qabid and Al-Basit tighten and loosen, the same way Al-Muqaddim and Al-Mu'akhir govern timing itself. The delay you have been suffering inside is not abandonment. It might be the most patient kind of love there is. Think back across everything you have just heard. A mercy with no edge to it, a justice that was never at risk of corruption, a knowledge with no gaps, a power with no rival, a love with no expiration, a patience deep enough to let pain do its slow, invisible work, without ever once forgetting the one going through it. No human being, no matter how good, holds even one of these completely, permanently, without exception. And yet 99 times over, something does. If your name carries even a fragment of one of them, that is not a coincidence of language. It is an invitation, spoken every single time your name is called, to remember what you were named after, and to ask yourself honestly whether something capable of holding all 99 of these, perfectly, forever, without ever needing anything from you in return, might actually be worth turning toward. Al-Basir sees you exactly as you are right now, watching this. Al-Kabir knows precisely what brought you here, and As-Sabur is not in any hurry for you to decide. The door, as Al-Fatah promises, stays open.